Hey everyone, Miss GoElectric here, and for today's In Charge segment, I have with me Bob Stojanovic, who is with ABB, and he is actually in charge of the eMobility division here in America. So thanks for joining us today, Bob.
Thanks for having us, and thanks for joining us here at Formula E in Portland.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to sit down and talk a little bit more, not only about your background, but this whole Formula E conversation, because ABB's been a part of Formula E for a really long time, but you've also been a part of ABB for a really long time. So I really want to get insight on where you started in the company, because as far as I know, you kind of got into the grid category, but you've made your way all the way up to the e-mobility sector in ABB. So can you talk about that journey?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's been very, you say I've been part of ABB, more like ABB's been part of me for the last 23 years. So I came over to ABB in 1999, so November 15th, I remember the date exactly. I came over from a competitor, and I was in the variable frequency drives business, which is quasi-energy efficiency industrial automation business. So pretty much everything that you make uses electric motors, and that's part of the process. And then over the years, I branched off into other parts of the business. So ABB makes all kinds of industrial automation equipment on the electrical side, so anything from contactors to circuit breakers to the things that go to connect everything to electricity to the automation system. And then at some point, because I lived in California, they bought the whole sales force together to sell the entire infrastructure packages to energy companies. So over the years, there's big booms in thermal power, gas, electric, and then eventually wind came on and solar came on. Because I was in California, I was in touch with the customers that were developing those projects. We could see the trends coming. So it was kind of an integral process of getting the company to invest in those segments, either through R&D or an effort to at least sell to them, right? And then from there, because solar was so popular in California, I got into the solar vertical markets. So that effort was to try and get all of ABB to invest time and money in helping expand that market in North America. And then there was kind of a natural bridge from solar to microgrids. So there was a big effort in ABB at the time to get into microgrids, which effectively, like it sounds, is a mini grid within a grid. So if the grid fails, you have a sustainable, reliable system to support whatever the process is. And from there, another key piece of that was electricity, was getting into transportation from a vehicle standpoint, not just rail, but EVs came along. So being in California, the forefront of the EV boom in the U.S., I was again closer to the market, closer to where things are happening, kind of able to see the trends coming before they hit. So I joined that business in 2017.
There are these expectations that the grid can't support the onset of EV adoption that is coming to the market. So what would you say the reality of that is from your perspective?
So I've heard that a lot when I was in solar. I heard that when I was even in microgrids and EVs. I mean, it's an easy thing to say. If you're to drop in the targets of 2030 and say I need to support them now, that's absolutely true, right? But you don't get there overnight. So what it does, and again, I'm a technological optimist, meaning I don't think there's any problems you can't overcome with an investment in technology. You just need to think about how you're going to get there. And there's a lot of thought going into this. So it's not, I mean, it's hard to believe that you can get there, but you can, and I've seen us get there. People never thought you could get the price of solar panels under $1 a watt, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And here we are, right? So now the utilities are doing everything they can in order to incorporate it as part of their grid. So.
Now, I've heard from a lot of business leaders that it is cost prohibitive to build facilities here, to make things here in the United States. You guys have an office in California. You are pretty much all over the U.S., it seems, because you have 40 different facilities. You have 20,000 employees in the American market. So can you talk about why it's important to build here and the costs associated with that?
Yeah, so I think that's a common misperception. I think even now you're starting to see some wider trends in the industry where factories are starting to get built in the U.S. again. So I think the experiment offshoring is kind of completed and people figured out what's good and what's bad about it. We've always been a global company, so we have factories all over the world. What we try and do is we invest in the markets that have a need, right? So the U.S. is still the #1 economy in the world. We're a little slower on EV adoption than some of the other countries, but we've got all the learnings where we have stiffer competition in other markets. So what we've learned over these years is that your future is secure as long as you have a good offering, right? And a good offering doesn't necessarily mean best price. It just means that you have to have the right value for what you're delivering, right? So that's sustainable. That's sustainable business. But coming in just at the lowest price doesn't get you anything. I think we've all had that experience. You buy the lowest price thing, and sometimes you get what you pay for, right? So that's the path we're taking on this one.
For sure. So another portion of this, obviously we're here for Formula E, and your partnership with them has been pretty long-standing for many years, so that's kind of exciting. But what would you say the impact of your involvement in Formula E has done globally? Because this is a global racing series.
Yeah, it's a fantastic event globally. I think what it does is it brings home to people that you can do something like this at a highly competitive scale successfully. I mean, it's one thing to imagine yourself driving an EV on your day-to-day life. It's another thing to see high-performance vehicles race around the track in every country in the world. And it shows people that we're there, right? It makes you wonder, why am I not there already?
Yeah, for sure. And what do you think that is done for the United States market? Because we've seen racing series like Formula One really boom here, and people actually taking attention to motorsport. Do you think that the impact of Formula E is getting a little bit of more attention because of that? What about the involvement directly with your partners?
Yeah,
here?
there's definitely a crossover there. You can see it. I think the boom in Formula One is pretty well known that it was the Netflix series that helped drive that. So I think we could probably do some things on the media side that would make things a lot more exciting for electrification. But I think as you look at the performance that you can get out of electric motors, there's a long way to go in improving the performance of those vehicles. I mean, so much so that Formula One may look a little not competitive.
I know, it's kind of interesting because we just came from an event where it's like, guess who's winning? All the electric cars are the ones setting records and really making a splash, so it's exciting to see. But let's talk a little bit about charging infrastructure, because that's kind of the element that you're playing into as well here in Formula E. So can you talk about your involvement with the charging stations that you have in the garages at the Formula E races?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're lucky to be the official charging partner of Formula E this year. So we've got some of our chargers that have been converted to be portable units that travel around with the event, and they're used to charge all the vehicles for the race.
And they're a little bit lighter weight, as I've understood, for this particular series, just to kind of minimize the logistics impacts and things like that, right? Are there any other changes that you've seen over the years that you've made to your equipment, not only in the racing series, but that have impacted the products that you actually sell to your customers?
Yeah, so for the racing series, it's clearly anything you can do to make them more resilient to withstand travel and vibration. I think that's the hardest part. The charging is actually not the hard part. The hard part is getting it from site to site, making sure it's intact and functional and tested. So that's probably the biggest engineering challenge with that. And I think the benefit from that is you look at the way your products are designed and see what you can do to make them lighter, more reliable, more responsive, right? So how that translates to the field is you learn some hard lessons on reliability, and then you implement your changes.
All right, so there is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program that's getting put into place, and a lot of companies are rushing here to the United States to manufacture products for that program. You guys are building some of your products that also meet those requirements for the NEVI funding, 180 kilowatt over in South Carolina. So can you talk about the ramp of production and the volume out of that factory for those particular units and how that's being affected by the NEVI program?
Yeah, absolutely. So we saw this coming for some time, and we were going to domesticate manufacturing anyway. We just needed to get to the volume that was necessary, and over the last 3 years, we've seen quite a boom just in the organic market. So having federal and state funding help drive the business further just made the investment a no-brainer. So we've been working on this for some time. Supply chain's the biggest challenge, but we do have a product that is going to satisfy the NEVI requirements. We're going for Wave 2, which has got a 55% U.S. steel content piece to it. So we're ready to go with that today, so we can manufacture that product today. And we're also making some smaller chargers to support some of the bus charging, depot charging requirements that also have a requirement for Buy America components. So with that, we hope to invest further in production for the rest of the U.S. market. In fact, we're feeding some of our customers with some non-NEVI chargers out of that facility right now. So.
I will say I was on an education program with Nissan at the beginning of the year, and actually at those dealerships I stopped and charged at a lot of the ABB smaller 24 kilowatt units that they have at the dealerships. So could you talk a little bit on the foothold that you have in that market, because dealership and the service side of charging infrastructure is also really important.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point, because people forget that before you electrify the rest of the country, you probably need to electrify the places where you're going to pick up your vehicle, so that the people can pick up a vehicle and actually take it for test drive or take it home. And there's things that people are not aware of, that there's a requirement that there's a minimum low state of charge on the vehicle when they're unloaded at the dealer, so they have to charge them up. Now, the size of charger you put at a dealership is dependent upon the infrastructure at the dealership. So if you can't take a 50 kW charger or a 150 kW charger, you take what you can get. So 24 is a pretty good size, or 20 kW for a passenger vehicle, because you can fully charge it probably within 2 hours, depending on the state of charge in the battery. So it's not too taxing on the system, and it's really good for dealers or people that don't have a huge volume of cars to charge.
Yeah, and it seems like you have quite a few out in the field right now. What would you say is kind of your mix and estimate of that?
Ooh, the mix is, that's a good question. It's misleading, because there are a lot of dealers in the country. I'm going to say there's probably 16,000 dealerships in the United States. So if every one of them gets one, that's a lot of little chargers. But we'll see a proliferation of both, because I think there's a flexibility piece to it, as you can charge more cars with smaller chargers all at the same time, rather than wait in line for the faster charger. So the numbers are probably going to be 2 to 1 for the small ones.
All right, so we have seen a lot of DC fast charging come to the market with varying speeds and lessons on thermal optimization and things of that nature. Can you talk about, since the competition is very stiff, can you talk about the ways that ABB's products for DC fast charging stand out?
Yeah, so there will always be competition. If there's not competition, you're probably not in a good market. So we're aware of that, and we're investing in R&D to make sure that we cover the most needed products in the field. So there's a couple different markets. So you can look at public charging, and you can look at fleet charging. They're both very important to us. And then there's the residential stuff. What we're doing, I think, that's important for both fleet and public, is we've invested a lot in service, right? Because it's important that those products work, and you can't just expect them to sit out in the public and get used and abused and continue to work. So you need to have a good service protocol, preventive maintenance, active field response, because things go wrong. They should go wrong, and you're only as good as your response to when things go wrong.
For
so
sure.
That's what our biggest investment is here locally. And then, of course, on the R&D side, we continue to spend time improving our electrical components and power modules to make sure that they can last a minimum of 10 years in the field. And in this, I think with climate change, we're starting to see a more challenging thermal environment out there. So I think Texas has been 40 degrees Celsius or 120 degrees more or less for the last 2 weeks, which is unheard of in the month of June. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, do you think, as far as fast charging speeds, because we've seen anything from like 400 to 480 kilowatts, is that kind of something that are you kind of focusing more on the reliability and the service side, like you said?
The power is not an issue, right? So it's making sure reliability is there, because to me, power is bragging rights. There's no vehicles out there. I think Lucid is maybe the one that can take 250 kW.
Plus, yeah.
Even the Porsche Taycan's like 227. So those are bragging rights, I think, and you really depend on the vehicle, and they can't take that full power for a lot of time. So that's just a high watermark. What's important is that you can get a high amount of power for a long period of time, and that goes to thermal and electrical reliability of the product.
For sure. Now, you said fleet, so one thing
Yeah.
I want to touch on real quick is the megawatt charging.
Yeah.
Is that something that you guys are pursuing?
Absolutely.
those-
We're 100% in on that. We're looking for pilot customers actively as we speak. So we expect to get some pilot units out in the field in 2024, maybe late 2023. And then we're waiting for the standard to go wide, and then we'll go into full launch on that product.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm super excited to go to my very first Formula E race, but what should I be looking out for when I go there? Because you've been to one before.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. There's a couple things that it's not intuitive. If you've been enough, I mean, you've been to some Formula One races or other types of internal combustion engine races. So the biggest thing that you're gonna see the impact on is that one is you don't hear them coming, right? Two is you can have a conversation when they go by. And then we've got a pretty good pit row experience so that you can go and check out all the different technologies and the drivers there. So it's really meant to be for the public to enjoy, and I think you're really going to have a good time.
Well, thank you for joining me today, Bob, and thank you all for watching. We really appreciate you tuning in. And until next time, drive, fly, ride. Go electric.